There's a bunch of folks. But really appreciate the folks that are online listening in, also attendance. This first really digital equity. This is our first focused digital equity workshop / session / listening session we have. And I think we're going to have one of the first 8 that we're going to do around the state. And we're going to have plenty of opportunity for folks to also provide feedback. But this is why, I'll tell you, and I think you've heard this from me, and this is what we talked about at the summit in Alexandria, but I'll tell you, folks, all of these investments that we're making, and we have a number of providers that we have awarded to the education, broadband, and reach more. Any other providers? Alex, okay, so we have provided grant agreements, we provided awards to all. But I'll tell you, look, we've had a really good run over the last 18 months getting us to where we are. Setting up the foundation for our office. Thomas Tyler and David Lehman, who's with our office here. So that's the entirety of our office, the 3 of us. But we've done a great job working with all of you and setting the foundation for our office, getting things really going, executing on our grant program, committing a bunch of dollars. But where all of this is going to go, the ways, is if we don't address issues that are not only impacting one segment of the community, but all segments. This is really important for us. Developing the first digital equity plan for the state of Louisiana is really important for us. The listening session over the next couple of hours, and we want all of you to provide honest reactions, feedback, conversations, is the fact that what we learn in the next 2 hours, what we learn in the next couple of months when we go around the state is going to undergird how much money you will receive from the infrastructure bill. Because I need to take your feedback, I need your perspectives on why digital equity and digital inclusion are impactful to your lives, both professionally and personally. Help us inform where we need to direct these infrastructure dollars. Okay, so your feedback and honesty and thoughts are important. And it isn't just thoughts from the internet service providers. They've got their own perspective. It's thoughts from the community colleges, because you have your own perspectives. It's thoughts from higher ed, because you have your own perspectives. It's advocates for the disabled community, because you have your own perspectives. Right? It's thoughts from everyone in this room and everyone that's listening that is really important with respect to what we need to learn and understand to solve this issue that exists. Which is really not just an access issue, but affordability, literacy, and the device issue. In every segment, whether you're a farmer, small business, teacher, healthcare professional, you all have different use cases on the lack of internet, the affordability issue, the device issue, the literacy issue. Okay? So I don't want to necessarily go through this because I think you know the sizing of the problem. But the most important thing that we need to focus on as an office is, we will continue to focus on this as an office, is we need to work at the same level of urgency to commit, spend all of these dollars in the right way as all of y'all need it. Need internet on a daily basis. Okay. So I'm going to shut up. I'm going to hand the conversation over our colleagues and partners within the Blanco Center and within the Planning Commission. So we are tied to the hip on the creation of this digital equity plan, the Board of Regents, that are doing phenomenal work on all things digital literacy, with higher ed, the planning commissions, with Dr. Stephen Barnes, the Blanco Center, because we are going to make sure that we try to understand and capture all of your thoughts, all of your ideas, all of your concerns as we put together this state's first digital app. This is really important to the governor. Every other week, the governor is saying, "Hey, where are we with this?" Saying to keep moving, all things broadband. It's important to Commissioner Darden. It's important to everybody. Right? So we're successful as a state so far in the eyes of the feds because of how much engagement we've had with all of you. I think you've seen us on the road, spent time with all of you individually. And so I'm going to spend the next couple of hours doing a lot of listening, note taking. My colleagues will as well. Look forward to the further conversation. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay. Can you hear me? All right. So I'm Anna Osland. I'm with the Blanco Center. We thought we'd start with a few sort of digital equity definitions so that we're all on the same page as we're talking about this. And a lot of this meeting is really going to be us listening to you, but we wanted to sort of set the table to begin with so that we can talk a little bit about digital equity, why it's important, and what's the language that we're using so that we're all on the same page. So as you can see, as we think about digital equity, it's really more than one component. So it's a condition in which all individuals and communities have the information technology capacity needed for full participation in our society, democracy, and economy. And we can think about that as sort of a table that you need all four legs out there to be able to support it. So that means that we need to have the devices for people to be able to connect. That means the actual connection itself, that it's affordable and it's reliable, it's efficient. It means the programs to be able to connect, and of course the digital skills. So if we have parts of our community that are missing one or more of those areas, then that becomes a problem for achieving digital equity. So the other sort of language that we want to talk about is the digital divide. So we know that as we think about digital equity, that some people in our community have more challenges in connecting to the internet with all of the resources and the skills that they need to get there, and that it disproportionately affects some people more than others. So we know that there's a potential gap between being able to get there and then the challenges in how you get there. So we know that different groups within our community are disproportionately affected, and we know in Louisiana that we have a large proportion of our population that is not white, that is indigenous, low income, that have some sort of impediment or medical disability that keeps them from connecting as easily as others. Older adults may lack the technology skills or have other connection challenges, and then rural areas. More than a quarter of our state is rural, and so the challenges are different in rural areas than in urban areas. So as we think broadly about these as several call outs and additional areas, we know that we have a lot of challenges ahead of us. So Louisiana has a draft vision for where we're going as we think about digital equity. And we'll read this to you, but know that this is a draft vision and one that we're continuing to build. And so as we go across the state with the meetings that we'll hold and individual stakeholder engagement and conversations, that this is something that is certainly a working draft, but that we want to commit to a vision as a state. And so as we move forward, you'll probably be hearing more about this vision and have opportunities to help us make sure that we have the right one for Louisiana. So right now, our working draft says that Louisiana is committed to the vision that all residents and community have access to the information technology needed to achieve digital equity for all. By 2029, all residents will have the opportunity to connect through affordable broadband, to obtain the appropriate technology, and to learn the digital skills needed to improve their quality of life. So we'll leave that and continue on just a little bit. Rachel's going to talk about our digital equity plan and the process.
Good morning, I'm Rachel Goda with the Acadiana Planning Commission. I'm the Director of Economic Development. So a little bit about why we are writing the plan. And I think one, the overall goal is obviously to improve the lives of our Louisiana residents, but also to address the barriers to digital equity faced by the state's population. Part of the plan is to really, the reason why we're going into the level of depth is really to garner feedback and input. So it's not necessarily, us telling you what the plan is, it's incorporating the feedback from our community. So that is a priority, and that's the reason why we're doing extensive outreach, to be able to incorporate that feedback. But also to understand what is the reality in terms of what are the challenges and the barriers that you all face with regard to adoption, access, affordability, even equity and then digital skills and literacy. We also want to ensure that we're securing the sufficient funding and also deploying the funding appropriately to ensure that every community resident is, the last mile is served to every household, but also to create programs that would help improve digital literacy, digital skills all across the state. And then again, why we are writing the plan to ensure that the partnership is solidified, not only at the state level, but when it comes to creating a plan, it's not just a plan that sits on a shelf, but it's actionable steps. How do we create sustainable programs that can be implemented? And how do we create there's been preliminary discussions about creating regional consortiums or digital navigators or creating programs that can continue on beyond the life of the creation of this plan. And then we want to ensure that the plan is reflective of what is really going on throughout the state. So a couple of things, just so you can all understand who are the partners, what is the collaboration. I think the strategy that we came up with early on, I think we stumbled into it a little bit, but beneath Secure, had early conversations with the Board of Regents, and Susanna's here, Rebecca, as well as Lori with the Board of Regents and a couple of other folks. So the Board of Regents is a critical partner, as well as the higher ed institutions. And the higher ed institutions are listed here, just so you can see across the state what that looks like. And then, of course, here with the Blanco Public Policy Center, they are the lead in terms of the institutions and creating, I guess, the plan, as well as the leading the consortium of higher ed institutions. Then we also have, in partnership with the Board of Regents and obviously the Connect LA office, the higher ed institutions, we have the planning districts. So part of the planning district's role is we secure funding early on from EDA to do a lot of outreach and understanding the broadband needs in our state. And this was a little bit prior to COVID. So we began these conversations early on, and then the State Office of Broadband came online a couple of years ago. And instead of doing something separate, the planning districts folded our efforts and really partnered with Connect LA, as well as the other efforts that are emanating from the feds and the state. So along with the digital equity plan, the BEAD plan, some of the mapping, we're helping to support the Connect LA office. So you'll see our districts here. Some are represented online, and for those that are maybe listening online that represent other areas, this is just a list to see who the other planning districts are. One of the other partners I do want to mention is the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, so NDIA, not to be confused with people who know NTIA. Government likes our acronyms, but NDIA is a critical federal partner that will provide a lot of the consulting service to help create our digital equity plan here in the state of Louisiana. And they're also providing these same services across the US. So one of our goals with this is to ensure that we're reaching what they're calling in the notice of funding opportunity is the covered populations. So the outreach goals obviously is to ensure that we're reaching the diverse stakeholders, looking at a little bit more at our workforce and our labor unions, the good paying jobs, and then the recruitment of women and marginalized groups. So we want to ensure that we're getting appropriate feedback from these different populations, because each population is affected differently when it comes to broadband access or broadband digital literacy and skills. Our goal is very ambitious. It's to be the first in the nation with regard to coming up with a digital equity plan. But we have, over the next 3 months, our target is to engage this sector that you see here represented. We have invited people across Acadiana in our planning district that is representative of these populations, and this will take place all across the state. So like Vineet mentioned earlier at the beginning of this meeting, there will be 8 regions across the state, eight meetings across the state, and then we'll do additional outreach and engagement to ensure that we're meeting the exact metrics we need in order to incorporate that into the digital equity plan. So I'm not going to list everybody, but you can see, you can kind of get an idea of who the covered populations are and who the target audience is for the digital equity plan. And then in regards to time frame, like I said a little bit earlier, our goal I think is to be the first out of the gate in terms of a national goal. September, October, and November will really focus on the stakeholder outreach and engagement. The idea is that in December or Q1 of next year, all of that feedback will be synthesized by the Blanco Public Policy Center in partnership with the other higher ed institutions. We hope to have a draft plan that will be published sometime in Q2, Q3 maybe of next year, and eventually provide an opportunity for additional feedback on whatever the draft plan is, and then finalize the plan by April, which is very ambitious, but we think we can pull it off, and we've kind of set up the outreach and engagement to do that and to inform the plan. So today's opportunity is really to listen to you guys and to continue the feedback, and I'm going to pass it over to Anna so she can give you some regional metrics regarding digital equity and some of the data that's critical to the conversation today.
All right, let's see what we can do here. So in terms of having a conversation about Acadiana, we wanted to pull some information and talk with you about it. So I'm going to show you that we have a link there, and if you want to look at it on your phone, you can. I'm going to walk you through it, but I'm going to basically X out of this and go to the dashboard that we have set up. While I'm doing this, I'm just going to say that Matthew on our team is in the back and helped set this whole dashboard up. So we'll be launching a website before too long. This is our first meeting, so you guys are our guinea pigs, and we just thought we'd share some of this information here so that we can talk about it and have a conversation as a region. So you can look at this now, you can look at it with me here, or you can look at it later and we can share that information with you. So we've done a few things. You'll be able to see here, we've looked at it by age, by type of access and internet subscription, and then by income level. We know that these are 3 parts of the equation. We're working to add a few other things that weren't quite ready for this one, but there's a lot here to take a look at. So this is all census data, and you can look at it if we are interested in looking at children, at working age adults, or at people that are age 65 and older. You can look at it that way. We can change it to has a computer and broadband, has a computer dial-up only, no subscription. And let's just look here in Lafayette Parish if we are interested in kids under 18. So we can scroll over and we can find detailed information about each of those different everyone in Lafayette Parish. I'm gonna go through this briefly and I'll give you guys time to look at it yourself later. We can also look at it by planning development district. So if we want to just look at region 4, we can look at it here. We'll put the US on so we can look at how region 4 is doing. Like pretty close, very similar in terms of where region 4 is compared to the US. And then we can go look at individual parishes here. So if we wanted to look at Evangeline Parish and how they're doing, we'd say that the under 18, about 95% has a computer. I think is what we're looking at right now. Has a computer total. If we want to look at has no subscription though, let's look at that. This is good. It's going down since it started in 2017. But you can see down here, Vermilion Parish is the lowest. Up here, St. Landry Parish, about 15% doesn't have a computer and a subscription to the internet. So that's quite a few kids. And there's a big difference between Vermilion and St. Landry. St. Landry and Evangeline have some of the highest rates. So we'll look at that. I'm gonna briefly skip over to our other dashboard. So if we wanna look a little bit more about subscription types, we can see, we can choose by year if we wanted to do that, 2018, all the way through 2020. We wanted to look at who doesn't have internet. And I know that we darkened the room a little bit so that this could be easier to see, but I know that this is hard to see a little bit, so we apologize. We wanna go look at Lafayette Parish or St. Landry Parish. We can get all of the information here about it. Who doesn't have internet? About 11% of households. In St. Landry Parish, no internet increases to 28%. A huge difference, and it's unacceptable. And then if we scroll down, we can look at a few things here. We can again look at it by district. So if we want to look at District 8 versus the United States, we can look at that. We can look at District 4 again. I'll let you look at that on your own time. I'm speeding through this because we want to spend more time talking with you than just showing it. But we want to make sure that there's information available here so that people can educate themselves about where our region is, where our parish is, in comparison to other parts of the state and in comparison to the US. So then this one looks at it by income level. So I have it set up right now that we're looking at the less than 10,000. We could look at less than 20,000. As we're thinking about this, we can think about our ALEC population, and we can think about folks that have a lower income, and we can go ahead and let's look at District 4 again and see how we're doing. And we can look at each of the parishes. And then down below on this one, if we wanted to look at that, we can sort and say, this is all types of internet here. We can say, okay, which parishes in the higher income groups don't have access, so they have no internet subscription. And you can see that, you know, higher income but yet no internet subscription, then maybe that has more to do with, you know, ability to get, you know, a line to your house or something like that. So we can sort it that way. The green here, the lighter green is obviously region 4, so we can look at that. Anyway, just wanted to say that this information's out there. Please take a look at it and use it to drive a conversation with the groups that you work with within your community about digital equity. Go back to the slide, Rachel. And actually, if there's questions about that, I'm happy to talk about that before we do it. Yeah.
Anna, how'd you get the data?
Expenses data, American Community Survey. So it's all publicly available. And we just downloaded it, and then Matthew made it a little easier to understand because, you know, it's great that there's a lot of data out there, but it's better if we can access it together and use it to, you know, set the table for our conversation. Oh,
or you can use
the QR code. Yeah.
Was there something more surprised you, or was this just completed backup or
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I think that, you know, this really illustrates. So we've heard anecdotally that, you know, rural areas are having much more struggles being able to connect because of lack of infrastructure, or that the infrastructure that's there isn't sufficient. And so we can say, okay, this is what people are telling the census, and we can look at it kind of at a broad scale and say that, yeah, like when we look at St. Landry, when we look at Evangeline Parish here, that there are pretty significant differences in what we have at Lafayette. So, you know, as we're thinking about that broadly, we're able to look at, you know, large scale data. But the question there too is like, what is the census missing? And so that's the reason why we're having these discussions with people today, is that it's great to see that sort of broad brushstroke information, but what's also really important is to get to the heart of the matter of like how that impacts your community. So, if we're thinking about like which communities are having more struggles, or within a community that has access, who doesn't have access there, and like how can we make sure that, there are opportunities for that. So as we're thinking just broadly about that, I think that for me, looking at that data often provides more like questions, because I want to know more like than just the surface level.
I think some of the informal conversations that we've had in the past, the reality is you have a lot of competition here in Lafayette, and when you get out in the rural areas, it's, not that great. And if you don't live, in those rural areas, you really don't understand the impact that it has on those communities. But we've heard stories about police departments not being able to have telephone service or going offline frequently, which is, pretty scary, if you want to call 911, or hospitals having to pay, $6,000 to $10,000 a month just for internet service, or businesses having to pay $1,500 a month. And you're talking about economic survivability, at that point. So, those are the stories that we'd like to hear and to incorporate in this digital equity plan, and to really understand what are the challenges, what are the barriers, and what's the existing reality for our folks, so that we can, eventually solve those issues. And I wrote something down it's through NDIA, and it just kind of struck me, so I'm just gonna, kind of repeat it. The digital divide is the issue that we're working towards. Digital equity is our goal, and digital inclusion is the work that we have to perform. So as we go through these questions and as we seek and solicit feedback, just keep that in mind. And it's from the perspective of the table that Anna showed at the beginning of this presentation, is that those pillars and then the legs that support that. It's adoption, accessibility, affordability, and reliability. And not only is it an affordable network, but it doesn't go offline to where we can't access the services that we need. And then just ensuring that we have the digital literacy and skills, the adoption component of that. And if there's anything as we go through these outreach and these feedback questions, if there's anything stat that you would like to pull up, I think we can maybe do that while we're going through. Just
Keep
right
going.
into the
Okay, yeah. So we have a series of questions here, and what we'd like to do is get feedback from you. So we're gonna sort of turn the tables a little bit. We'll ask questions, but we want to stop talking and let you start talking. So we can either bring the microphone around or get loud voice, stand up and talk, but we're just gonna back and forth it, I guess. So the first question we have is about regional assets. So part of building this digital equity plan is thinking about what are the things that are special that we do have or that we don't in different parts of the state, and incorporating that as part of our plan. So, does your city, parish, region have existing programs or programs in development specifically aimed at addressing digital equity issues? And so we also have, especially for those that are watching online, a digital equity form that you can fill in to give us some of this feedback too. And we would ask, so there's a QR code and then the link here. We'd ask that for those of you that are here, that you also share this with your team that you work with. So if you're a school system and you want to share it with others at your school system, great. A business, or if you are, a neighborhood leader, that you share it with others in your neighborhood. We're here to garner as much feedback as we can. So anyway, that's our few things, and I'll have this on each of the different question slides. So existing programs or programs in development that are specifically, that will specifically address digital equity issues. Yes.
My daughter school submitted some documents that T-Mobile was giving out a free hotspot. Also that Cox Cable, of course, the discount on the internet service. And now they have another program that you can get a used laptop or desktop computer for your home if eligible. You get $100 off that used laptop or computer, which basically you're paying for shipping, $45. It looks like the most expensive one was $45 after the $100 discount. So that I'm pretty sure it's probably something that's citywide, but first we send it.
What school system?
Lafayette and South
Oh, yeah, folks, if you could introduce yourself and just let me know like where you're from so that we can continue. Part of this is we're gonna need to include that within our plan is like, we have to. So,
engineer with me with Acadiana workforce solution, but this is just something that is at home.
okay, thanks.
Oh, no, but that's the kind of feedback we're looking for.
Okay.
It's not just necessarily job related, but also personal experiences that you may share, that could benefit the,
No.
The question there was, did the school allow people to take home their notebooks? No. Rebecca?
I was just gonna add that $100 for the device. I'm pretty sure that's part of the ACP, the Affordable Connectivity Program.
Okay.
So a lot of providers are doing that across the country. It's great that they're doing that because not every provider, they have to opt in. But that is part of that affordable connectivity program, is to provide a affordable device, discounted device. So other locations may have that.
Yes, I have internet service at my home.
Other thoughts?
Jeremy Medier, I work with probation and parole. I just wanted to add that the T-Mobile thing is only for 5 years. So in 5 years, if you don't follow
We're gonna turn the lights up to kind of adjust the mood. So think about it in terms of maybe the populations that you represent. Nancy, I know you had a comment.
Yeah, I'm Nancy Sorensen, I'm the chancellor of LSU Unis. We have implemented, we installed the North Star
digital literacy curriculum in our integrated learning center. So it will be available to our students, but we also want to deploy it in the community as well as free training. So one of the things that I'm interested in, I think at the Broadband Summit, it was alluded to briefly, is what are the incentives that potentially will come from funding, not necessarily to attract our students, but the residents in our community to participate in this digital literacy program. I think at the Broadband Summit, we were talking about initiatives that have included Chromebooks for lower socioeconomic populations to use as an incentive to complete this training. But also what we're finding is that our students that are coming to us, and maybe it's part of the pandemic malaise, but especially in the region that we serve in Region 4, their digital literacy skills are rudimentary. And so we've actually seen, at least what we're reporting, somewhat of a decline in skills.
I know there are programs here, okay?
I'll just
I've had conversations with many of you. So help us understand what else outside of ACP, the Portable Connectivity Program, outside of what the providers, whether, ACP, Verizon, whomever.
It could be library programs, it could be school programs.
What else do you know either teaches computer skills, helps to address Wi-Fi issues? I know.
There's 2 school districts here, so I'm gonna call on folks, so don't worry. So at least 2. Here. So I see Superintendent Lazard over here, and you've got folks from Vermilion Parish, which are 2 ends of the spectrum. I don't know if either of you want to talk about the programs that you have going on in your school system.
We provided hotspots to all of our students that had connectivity issues, especially on the northern end of the parish. We had some real difficulties there, in addition to providing a Chromebook for every student. And they can take those.
Yes.
Maybe just to clarify, just definition, when we talk about digital literacy, are we talking about, I guess it's more of like, are we talking about software literacy?
So you missed our definition.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're
I
good.
apologize. You don't need to go back for me.
No, actually, it's a good,
But I
it's a
think
good.
that's a good reminder to just put that back up as well. That as we're thinking about digital literacy, that it's not just having a computer, it's not just having the connection. It's like, you know, what Dr. Sorensen is saying here about, like, is it the skills to be able to connect even if you have the connection there? Or is it being able to take it from by poem like in Evangeline Parish? Like, what is it we need? And what can we do for?
Well, I'll just say that digital literacy itself covers like all of those skills. So it would be like your basic computer skills, like what is a mouse, how to use a mouse, what is a USB drive, you know, and all of those things, as well as some more things like how to use the Microsoft Office suite, use Google Docs, understanding your digital privacy online, using social media, all of those things, so anything that you will encounter when you're using a laptop, all of those things.
And also smartphones too. Laptops are great, but telehealth, like being able to access appointments with your doctor when you're in a rural area and you don't have transportation to get to the doctor, you don't know how to use it to access that technology. That's a gap in your digital literacy skills.
John Fitzgerald, InfoLink. The question, it seems to me, is directed at top-down approaches, but what they're referencing are bottom-up approaches, right? And one of the things I find missing in the conversation are the role of local businesses, local technology companies that influence that bottom-up approach that makes things really last long.
Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit more? Like when you say missing, the bottom-up approach?
Well, in the question, I think, and the consideration given to bottom-up approaches, you know, there's one thing to talk about network layer, right?
Like the infrastructure.
The infrastructure itself, the connectivity itself, and although that's vitally important, obviously, there's a lack of addressing how digital interactions are mostly dominated by superscalers, that the money goes elsewhere, that our data goes elsewhere, that the money for our page views goes elsewhere. And I think for true sustainability, you have to look at how you can leverage that on a local basis, right? Through bottom-up approach, through supporting disadvantaged technology businesses, right? So I think there's a lot of important questions there. They're pretty nuanced, but really important to sustainability.
We actually.
Yeah, so I thought that was
Introduce yourself and where you're from. Just a little reminder, we'll keep saying that.
Sure. So I'm Ann Swanson, and I'm the director of a program called STEM at CGI that is at the technology company CGI. And so, so our mission is to introduce, inspire, and mentor students underrepresented in STEM, and our stakeholder group is very similar to the stakeholder group that you have listed. And so much like we were talking about some of those bottom-up approaches of my businesses, so some of the things that we do, we work with an organization, or one of the organizations we work with, called New Vision Leadership of Acadiana, and we mentor the students to participate in an app challenge. It's called the Congressional App Challenge, and they submit their applications to the congressman who picks a winner for the district. And we are meeting, in the past, we met with them at the library, and we were able to check out laptops from the library for the students to use for the sessions. And this year we're actually meeting at the Domain Center, so one of our park and recreation centers, which all have Wi-Fi. Or at least the Domain Center does, I think they all do. And then we were able to donate refurbished laptops to them from our company for them to use for the challenge. So that's probably like one of the more intensive things we do in the Lafayette area through this program. But that said, like, we're definitely available if you know, to help support efforts like this and connect with students on digital literacy.
Thank you. Chris?
Chris Disher, Acacia Broadband. We're from North Louisiana. I'm just kidding. We're from Acacia country. So I'm on my rural road show trying to help whoever needs help. And the city, the parish governments, the school superintendents are all willing to take a meeting, and they all want to help, they just don't know what to do. They don't have the resources. So they're easy to facilitate with because they wanted the same thing that we wanted to do. So, you grassroots approach type thing, help as many people as you can. We offer free internet to churches. So it sounds good, which it is really good, but it helps a lot of people very quickly in a radius in that area. It doesn't cost us much to do that. So it helps the local people. So, and a lot of parishes had American Recovery Funds that they use, help towards the gumbo grants, or you did their own projects. The cities have some taxes that they can do things, and they need some Wi-Fi downtown. But really, it's just kind of knocking door to door and asking people where they need help and giving them help.
Thank you, Chris.
My name is Crystal Lane, Regional Health Disparities.
Sorry, we're just trying to capture the feedback online. I can only go so far.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Crystal Hudkins, and I'm the Regional Health Disparity Social Worker for Office of Public Health Region 4. My question is really about, can you define what affordability is? And then secondary question would be off of this gentleman's kind of just spun a thought. So when we deal mostly with bringing up smaller community partners to help with health equity issues across the region 4, but also with the direct community. And so promoting this within meetings and whatnot, talking about it, what would it look like for some of the smaller stakeholders in the community? Are there grant funds available or some kind of financial support to expand that program?
Yes, absolutely. So I'll take the affordability question first. Affordability is defined, and I'll first take a step back. Digital divide was originally, I guess, the phrase was coined because of the cost of a computer itself. Now the digital divide has kind of transitioned into more of like access, the affordability of the internet service that is actually being provided. So it's not just the computer, but it's also the affordability of the subscription service. It could also be the affordability of the software programs and or the different, resources that are out there. Rebecca has, constantly reminded me that it's also about like the affordability of the resources necessarily at a library. Is it affordable for our students to be able to purchase the books, and what kind of programs are being, initiated from the library standpoint to make those resources available to the public. So affordability can mean multiple different things when it comes to broadband. And then your second question was, are there grant funds, and let me make sure I'm capturing it correctly. Are there grant funds to support different communities in their digital literacy programs? Yep. So I think that's what the overall goal is beneath it is probably in April, we'll have this plan made available for the entire state of Louisiana. With that comes an allocation of about, and you might get it wrong, $25 million to continue the programming beyond the life of the plan. So the plan is really to set up how do we spend the $25 million and what kind of programs need to be initiated across the state to ensure that we're meeting affordable metrics, that we're meeting, the access, the setting up digital literacy programs, whether in our libraries or our, higher ed institutions, and making things more accessible for our communities. I think that maybe answered your questions. Yeah. Okay. Good.
But as a healthcare professional, what were you seeing that was impacting a patient's ability to suddenly access healthcare? They didn't have it. Yeah, I'm asking you a question. I'm just because I think we also have data in terms of the challenges that people have when suddenly everyone's shifted home, suddenly clinics close, right? And that when we look at data from the MCOs, they do an annual survey, I guess, of folks. The two biggest barriers they saw in the survey was someone's inability to do telehealth effectively is because of literacy and accessibility. I mean, is that still very consistent?
So I think that's a little bit, I don't really practice correctly. Clients, we do interface with the community. So I'm more on like the systems level of organizational approach for social work. But some of the things that we have encountered in the public talking about, here's this information over here, here's a link here, is that not everybody has the devices or lives in the area. It's a lot of our populations that we deal with for our role in our role. So the infrastructure may not even be there for that access if they did have the device. A lot of that comes from opportunity, whether that be financial, whether that be because the infrastructure is not there. But then you also have the health literacy piece too, which I think is very critical to tie into digital literacy too, as you're building that. Our approaching healthcare as a state builder, incorporating that, making sure that it's intuitive, how to best serve all people in the game, not just the people who are that access. I don't know if that touches what you really asked, but that's the best answer that I can get.
I think that helps. I think that's consistent.
That's good to hear. So you can do it. That's next. And it's the case.
Yeah. I want to be distracted.
I'm Nick Pugh with the Pugh Family Foundation, and our foundation is focused on education. But here's what I think I know, and we'll let the folks on the panel confirm that, is the governor said he wants everybody to have the opportunity to be connected by 2029. He's going to use everything he's got to make sure that the infrastructure is paid for. And now there is a federal subsidy for qualified groups. Basically, one of the groups is if you're on free and reduced lunch. That's a $30 a month subsidy. Also, the affordability question got answered today is that Vanessa's office thinks that about $40 a month qualifies as affordable. I think the Lafayette school system will subsidize their students that qualify with $10, making it essentially free. Now, there's some challenges for that, but also I'm disappointed to hear that the charters don't let they take their devices home. I sit on the board over there. I'm going to ask why.
That helps.
It does.
One of the reasons is that kids tend to tear up computers and they got to get replaced. But that's another story for another day. But so I think the problem is getting solved for the school kids, and there's some challenges left to work on. So I'd like Gus to confirm the $40 a month, and basically the infrastructure the governor will try to get the infrastructure to the underserved and not served yet, and that should happen by 2029.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Almost reach it. If you're in the first row, y'all can move down. It'll reach you in the first row.
Ms. Pugh, thank you for actually bringing that up and segue into my question. I was hoping someone would start to get there. I'm Adrian Kessler with LES Fiber. We have deployed that particular program to great effect. So thanks for bringing that up. But we talk a lot about the digital divide and equity and education. The big thing that I see missing so far with everything that we're doing here is an amazing program, by the way. Thank you. But I've seen
success with other programs throughout the country that's similar is the idea of education, digital education is actually much broader. I saw it with the mayor's convention. We are going out, and thank you, Denise, by the way, for all your work, helping us get our recent grant. We're going to deploy that to great effect, I believe. But it's much bigger than what we think in terms of the divide and lack of education. What I have found is there are many communities. These communities have got to have a champion within the community also fighting for us, beneath and us, and the providers to meet them somewhere. There are so many folks that have no idea of the impact that real broadband, high speed, down and up can actually bring to them in terms of economic development and economic empowerment. They don't understand. These mayors don't understand. I know that when I have conversations. So if they don't understand the impact that it can actually have, then guess what? They're not actually out there fighting for it as part of their utility infrastructure. The ones that are going to win ultimately, and they're going to turn their communities around and be able to compete with the rest of the state and the rest of the country. And so I don't know if we can incorporate that into this as well, so they understand how big of a deal it really, really is. Because right now we're doing that as providers, and we should. We're out there educating, hey, this is why you need this. And the ones that get it, the light bulb goes off. I'm sure you're seeing this on a gentleman from Major Broadband that's helping you as well. But you got to be running into that. They truly don't get it. And if they don't get it, then they're not fighting for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Lack of awareness is a real issue. As well as, when people actually have access, adoption is another element to that. Are they even able to adopt, the skills and have the skills to be able to, use the internet? If we could maybe shift to the next question, to talk a little bit about resources. So fun stuff. Does your city parish have resources? Everybody wants to talk about finances that you are putting forward or towards addressing the digital divide or digital equity issues. So any resources that you all can think of. I know most of the city parishes were given recent ARPA allocations. I'm assuming that most of them have been appropriated or expended, but maybe not. Maybe some are still on the table. But what kind of resources are even libraries or schools putting to address the digital divide?
We were able to hear a little bit over here from Evangeline. Say, like, what kind of work that you got here? Talk to us about the resources, y'all.
And our students have Chromebooks. So our students do take home their Chromebooks. We also have, at only of our locations, we have Wi-Fi access that's on the outside of the building. So if you want to drive up into the parking lot, you can connect to our system and get free access. So we do offer that. We tried at the beginning of the pandemic with hotspots. It didn't work out too well for us. It's very expensive to use a hotspot, because you have to filter and all that kind of stuff. So we decided to put the access points on the outside of the buildings and allow students to come to the parking lot.
So outside of your school?
Yes, sir.
What's the reach? How far?
The reach. Yeah, go ahead. This is Ben Tubes, he's my network manager, so he can kind of talk to that.
So the reach is probably 500 feet. We have AC access points. So parking lots, common areas. But the problem there too is we advertise it, but it's still not being used. There was some question about like some of the back parts of town, like how we're gonna get access to some of those areas. So there are some churches that we looked at and tried to get involved, but nobody really.
And then why do you do that?
Kind of like what LUS is saying, just nobody wants to jump in and get the knowledge or figure out what's the best option.
Yeah, but when you're saying nobody, well, I'm just trying to unpack.
I don't think the clientele really cares to have access.
They're probably looking for access somewhere else, as opposed to coming to a parking lot. Is that fair? Maybe go to the library, or go to a friend's house, wherever.
Is transportation an issue? Is that part of the problem? And if it's on the outside of the school building, it depends on the student population and how many ride buses.
Population and who wants to learn and who doesn't.
Todd, you have some feedback?
Hey, talking about Acadiana Foundation, and yeah, early in the Lincoln Learn initiative here in Lafayette Parish, we were able to get Wi-Fi access points in parking lots of all 47 LPSS schools. But it's student-only access, it's filtered internet. Okay? So
Is it the same every million?
So we're not talking about digital equity, we're talking about extending school Wi-Fi. Right.
Yes.
Begins to maybe start to help a young child if they can get there and be safe and able to eat better.
Right, yeah. Talking school system, so what do we do?
My name's Catherine Fenstermaker, work for CH Fenstermaker and Associates. Just keenly interested in this issue and obviously the economic viability of our community and state going forward. I want to say it again. John, you recently connected with me. Todd, you just talked about the Lincoln Learn Initiative, Vermilion Parish, extending Wi-Fi outside of school buildings. I guess my question is, looking at, like, do we have a model of success? Do we have these microcosms or these instances of successes? Are we studying those, and how can we copy and paste this success? Because I feel like with Lincoln Learn, we were starting from scratch. And I'm sure, like, you know, the replicability of success is really important, like the scalability of success. And so I guess just like thinking in that direction, what have been the resounding successes, and then how do we translate those into the underserved populations? Yeah, I think those are great questions, Catherine, and part of what some of these meetings that we're having across the state is to hear really what are best practices in Louisiana, but we know that that's not enough. And so part of like building a dashboard to look at what equity and what accessibility looks like here is also comparing ourselves to other places. And so, you know, we were talking on there, we have like the US average on that, but we're also talking, and Matthew was like, oh man, like we're trying to get this all done in like 4 days, but he's like, we need to put the other states on there too, because we need to be able to look at best practices in other places, because we can't just compare to ourselves. So yeah, I think that those are great questions, and part of this is saying, like, I know that Lincoln Learn has really been looking at what can we do for best practices in other areas, and they've got a few, and so definitely, like, Todd, I'm looking at you, fill in the form, and like, give me all the information so we can incorporate it if you don't want to like share it broadly, or all of those things. We're looking across the board, like Acadiana Parish, Vermilion Parish. If you're finding something that is working out really well, Jennifer, I would call on you for St. Martin Parish, but what are the things that are working well? We know that businesses that are in rural areas have challenges connecting, you know, or we hear anecdotally challenges connecting to be able to run credit cards because they don't have access to the internet. So like, if that's happening in your community, what are the workarounds? And if you don't have a workaround, what are we doing that we can, you know, what can we make happen so that we have that ability to exactly, you know, do it happen? But we want a vibrant Louisiana. We want to be able to live here. We want to make it happen. So,
Yeah, Carlos Sarvin, Chief of Minority Affairs Office of President Josh Guillory. Wanted to give a shout out to my colleague at LUS Fiber. We've had conversations about our rec centers, making those available for after-school tutoring. We had a very successful summer youth program, and Wi-Fi access was very important to those summer camps that were there. But we're also looking at how can we have acquired some federal funding, especially along the I-90 corridor, not only Lafayette Parish, but partnering with other areas around to make sure that low-income, underserved areas are getting access to Wi-Fi So that's something that LUS Fiber, soon to be the fastest internet in the nation, I think starting next month in October, is looking at how can we make sure we can do our part to close that teacher divide.
Hi, Jennifer Stelly, St. Martin Parish. We had a little celebration last week about some broadband wins we have with Cajun Broadband. Actually got fiber to the home last week, I think. So, you know, the parish is matching those ARPA funds and jumbo money. So we're really starting to turn it over and actually get people the internet physically. But St. Martin Parish is doing a lot of what everybody else has talked about. Our library has a hotspot program, but it's just not enough. You know, the whole Stevensville, Bell River area has one hotspot in their entire library that they can check out. So it's really not meeting the need that's there when they know that there is a need. Our sheriff's department has started a program for the incarcerated. They have an education program where they're teaching some of these digital literary skills. So I think that's one area that we don't really think about a whole lot is educating the incarcerated and preparing them for reentry. So we're doing that.
Do you remember the name of the program, or is it?
I really don't.
Are there any other covered populations that you all can think of, whether it's incarcerated, like what Jennifer just mentioned, or differently abled folks?
I think a piece we're missing whenever we talk about skills in educating people is our older generation. A lot of them have grandkids that live with them, and whenever COVID happened, well, why do we need this internet? Well, you need access so your kids can learn. But not only that, you need this for telehealth. You need this they don't know what they even need. And I think that's kind of a piece we're missing is we need that public outreach so that we can educate them on why they need it.
Just typing. Okay, good.
I am Annette Montano, chairperson of the Governor's Advisory Council on Disability Affairs. Internet is extremely important to me because it is my link to communication with others. My disability makes communication without my iPad near impossible. Disabilities who are homebound need the internet as a means of communication. They can email, order items, use all types of internet services. Otherwise, these individuals would be isolated from the outside world. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other resources that we can think of before we move on to the next question? That's what I was gonna ask. Is there anybody from the public library system from any of the parishes that is represented here? Okay. Don't see any, but we'll make sure to include them in some of the survey and feedback. Let's move to the next question on digital equity barriers. Are there specific barriers facing city, parish, region that pose challenges for achieving digital equity in your region? And again, it could be barriers to access, barriers regarding affordability, barriers for the differently abled, different, races, ethnicities, incarcerated folks, indigenous populations. Trying to get everybody creatively thinking.
Keep talking. I guess looking at equity barriers, and I think this plays off of your previous question talking about resources, And just from our perspective, looking at, from a consultancy perspective, working as engineers, looking toward infrastructure improvements for municipalities across the state. And the huge challenge that we face is everybody can say, I want a new road, I want a new bridge, I want broadband access. But you run into the overwhelming barrier of that funding. And so I guess just as a business entity, the creative solution that we've come up with is forming internally a grants team. And then not only are we working with the municipality on the design, championing the project, getting a sense of what needs to be accomplished in the community, but then we're reaching out and we are fighting for that funding through the entire grant writing process. So if you can identify a grant that's available, you still have to reach out and tap into it. And that in and of itself is a heavy lift for a community. And it is a niche skill set to be able to do grant writing. So I think whenever you're looking at this and you're looking at barriers, I just want to applaud you. I love the maps that you've done. I love that you're looking at data-driven decisions. It's obviously a multifaceted issue, and it's going to involve like an all-hands-on-deck approach toward resolution. But I guess I would say, as far as barriers are concerned, it would be part of it, looking at the financial burden of acquiring the infrastructure and then putting boots on the ground for the awareness and the understanding of the importance and finding a project champion in the community. This is going to be a heavy lift.
Yeah, thanks for identifying all of those different capacity issues that aren't related directly to just the able or just the skills, but it's like a whole range of capacity issues that are part of that. Other thoughts?
Yeah, so one barrier that we have as a company that's helping as a public service, helping increase digital literacy is we have a capacity issue in terms of like, we can do this so many hours a month, but we can't do it for everyone everywhere. So I guess we have a reach and capacity issue about how much we're able to offer.
Thank you, Ann. Let me ask it this way. Can you give examples of times where a lack of internet or maybe lack of a computer hindered your ability to provide the service that you offer as an agency? I'm going to call on DPS. From an incarcerated population perspective, is there any, issue or barrier or challenge for delivering, whether it's digital literacy or maybe just, life skills, computer access, even when they come out of incarceration and they transition back into the normal life?
So, with the Department of Corrections, there's so many there, and every single person has a different barrier that they start out with or come across. So we have a huge population of elders that come out, they've been there 20+ years sensitive, and they were never around for the first iPhone where you had to click 3 times to receipt. Went to us, now they have a keyboard, they have to learn all of that. We also have a range of people who, based on their decisions, gone in and out of the system, and computers were not important to them. And now they have to learn what a mouse is. So the physical mouse, and now laptops have 2 buttons in a little space. So we have to teach them that. And
are there programs in place to do that currently?
We have a program in the 16th agency to do that, but it's me, and then I have to find that person, and then I have to coordinate times and places that they can access my computer system that I have to physically bring to them. And I can literally do it on the side of the road as long as I can plug in my little the hotspot area. And the network. But finding a location to do it, I partnered with the library because there's a library everywhere. then I also have to coordinate with the library. Do they have an event going down? Can that person even show up between 8 to 5? Can I do it based on all the other jobs that I have? And so I cover St. Martin, St. Mary, and Acadiana Parish. And it's just nonstop there. But we do have something in place where I can teach up to 10 people at a time. Basic computer skills. They can get their mindset for free video on their probation role. But it's so many barriers that we haven't had on successful shit.
You mentioned your focus is on the elderly population.
Well, elderly wise would be those guys that are coming out after a long stint.
Right.
And they don't know the phone.
But you mentioned an older individual, right?
Yes.
So if you start to look at Louisiana, those are the rural areas where it's a particularly acute problem, you're talking about a rapidly aging population.
Yes.
What do you think would be helpful to target programs or resources? What do you think the barriers are for folks that are formally incarcerated, but folks like us, right, that are 75? And are there programs? So is the library the only solution?
In my area, yeah, that's the only one that I'm aware of. We have some nonprofits that will go above and beyond.
Yeah.
But they have limitations, they're a nonprofit. They have, unless they do their grant funding, they have no income. They're doing this just to help out. Besides libraries, like a lot of people know New Iberia used to have Peppy. We don't even have Peppy anymore. And that was to help you with basics. We don't have a lot of resources. And then when you go to St. Mary or St. Martin, it's just
Dr. Fitzgerald, go back to your question about barriers. Start off by posing a question. Turn on your phone, how many Wi-Fi access points?
It depends where you're at.
Depends on where you are. Absolutely. But if you're in an area where there is private infrastructure, Wi-Fi everywhere, right? It's a common carrier that everybody uses. What's a lot of infrastructure out there? What's the barrier for using it? Security. Right? How do the superscalers do it? How do AT&T? How do Cox? How do Comcast do it? How does Starbucks do it? Clearinghouses, workers, right? I would like to assert that if you want to give private infrastructure the ability to share, then managing the commons from a security standpoint, by providing portalized access as a service, providing community resources for clearinghouses of some type of identifying factor, right? That you could enable private infrastructure to be able to aggregate, to share.
Cybersecurity will, is part of the conversation as well.
Catherine? Oh, you got one, Chris? We'll go to Chris and then Catherine.
So the smaller communities, their older communities, when the kids are growing up, they're gonna leave because there's not internet there. And so you'd love to live there because you're on the farm and you have some space, you can pet goat or whatever, so that you would live there. COVID kind of pushed people out of the cities, which is good for the rural areas. If they have internet, then they can thrive and grow back.
Listening to this lady talk about the incarcerated population, and I don't know, it makes me really hot because I think about, is it possible, and correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't Louisiana have one of the highest incarceration rates in the nation?
We are, so we are one of the highest, and we're working on lowering that. Prison level and parish jail level are two completely different, okay? In a state prison, we also program those clients that are in there, incarcerated people. behavior, they have to want to take whatever classes are offered at that prison. And then they have access to do something, some can even get college. Parish level, where most of, like, I know Iberia, St. Martin, and Mary State, like, if you get convicted in one of these areas, you have to have a 7-year or more sentence to go to a prison. Otherwise, you're staying here in the local jail, and you are only able to access whatever programs that sheriff can afford to pay for. And then, I mean, like, a jail has to pay for all the employees, all the medical costs, all the food, I mean, there's a.
I guess this just kind of gets my wheels turning, and to be honest, in my day-to-day living, I don't think often about the incarcerated population, but since we're talking about it here, I'm just thinking, I know that we're physically precluding these people from participating in society by keeping them locked down, but what about future thinking? If we're talking about reimagining what it means to be incarcerated, why are we blocking these people from participating on the internet? Are there jobs that they could be doing where they're, you know, participating in this, let's say, digital economy in ways that, you know, and I'm just thinking about it as a citizen, why not? It's just kind of disgusting to me to think about just this lockdown mentality that we have with these high incarceration rates in Louisiana. We're like effectively barring an entire population of people from participating in our economy, and it could be, you know, potentially beneficial for all of us to embolden them with these resources and tools.
Yes, so we have a couple more questions, I think about, two, no, 3. So existing digital equity plans, does your community, business, or organization have a digital equity plan in place or under development? It could be part of a community development plan, could be part of a comprehensive plan, maybe business plan or business continuity plan.
You know, as I'm sitting here listening, you know, LSUE has the beginnings of the plan. It needs to go under much further development. I so Superintendent Lazar is here. But really what we need to do in our area is that we need to be calling at least a tri-parish meeting, in my view, and have our parish presidents there and our superintendents there and talk collectively about a digital equity plan and all of the resources that are available and how we deploy it to all of the citizens that we are attempting to serve. Because, you know, cost, equipment, all of those are barriers across every single one of our populations. You know, our students are attempting to work off of our phones. I mean, we have a laptop loaner program. I wish we could provide a no-cost laptop to all of our students as they enter, but the phones can only do so much, and it really does not serve their purposes for learning, academic computing, workplace needs, all that kind of thing. So I'm going to certainly connect with my colleagues in the room because we haven't met collectively to get a handle on what we're doing in at least these 3 parishes, and we need to.
Well, I would say the immediate would be
Acadia, St. Andrew, and Evangeline, for those of you here. No, you're good. We're just trying to make sure they capture the comments online.
You know, we serve all of the region 4, so Iberia, all of those parishes, right? We really
Your backyard. Yeah. Well, and I would say this is a process as we're developing the state's digital equity plan. As you move forward with those ideas, please come back to us so that we can make sure that we're incorporating that within the larger statewide plan. And knowing that that also addresses some of the capacity issues that Catherine was bringing up earlier, is that like there's an economy of scale of thinking about how you address the challenges in your backyard. So, like that workforce solution and local workforce board, just any thoughts on like what you guys are doing? If you have a plan in place.
I'm Michael Pritchard, Industry Sector Coordinator for Workforce Submission out of Acadiana. I mean, basically, what we do is to help once you start your infrastructure, that type of thing, to help get people put to work, that type of thing. And obviously, the board is involved with everything we can do to support and, you know, these kind of organizations. The only thing I thought of with listening to everything is there any way for you all to survey the people? You've got your charts that, you know, we got all the people that go there now. You know why? Is it money for it? Is it that they use it? Is it you're going to get a ton of money? And you might have a town that just needs infrastructure. So you okay, we put the money in, put whatever we need to everybody's access. Doesn't mean everybody can use it. You know, is it yeah, I mean, I saw the bridge, the bridge down there, there's a pretty chunk of bridge that goes that in. Why? Now they can't afford it. So there's gotta be, if we find out those reasons, we can break the money down to, okay, we need some infrastructure in this area or this area. Now we need education in this area, and get the churches involved. They're the ones that are on the ground with their people. If there's a way to get surveys out with people, because everybody goes to schools to get whatever they need.
Right.
Schools take care
So I'm gonna flip that coin back on you. And I'm gonna ask you guys to help us and support us in this effort by distributing the links and the surveys that we send so that we can garner feedback, not only from who's present in here today, but those populations that we need to reach. And we, yep. Good.
Yeah, so if you go through, you can share this link right here, and you can copy the QR code if that's easier, and that'll take you to a form to input that information. So you're welcome to share this information, or in the end, we'll have like a link for our email. But yeah, please do share this, and we'd love to hear more from, like, if you want to share with staff or with the clients that you'll serve.
And before I move on, I'm gonna call on Jay, because Jay, you had a really good story that, you know, we retell often in regards to adoption of, you know, as you're laying your fiber network down, the difference between higher income communities versus lower income communities and adoption rates there. So I'll let him explain, because he can tell it better than I can.
My name is Jay Domingue with Reach 4 Communications, and we've been doing internet for 18 years now. And our biggest taker of adoption is for entertainment. And it has become TV now. So when we're putting our fiber in the ground, they just start signing up, you know, because they want it right then and there. But there were 3 homes on this one road. One was a camper that looked abandoned. One was another house where the sewer just ran right into the yard. And the other house was a nice house way in the back. Guess which 2 of the 3 got internet first at the highest package? The camper and the other house. The nice house didn't want to pay the $150 install because he was okay with his phone. That's all he needed it for. And it's just, that's our experience. So they'll get it if they need it. You know, and just one other story, talk about digital literacy and stuff. I have a friend of mine whose father's not doing well. His mother never drove. And now they're at a point where they got to talk to the doctors and stuff online. She doesn't have a phone, and she's scared to use it, and will not use it. So I don't know how much you can convince people, but if they're not willing to use it, or they don't see a need for it, they're not going to adopt it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is just understanding the basic concept of broadband, why it's important, why does it benefit me as an individual, and how do you convince people, you know, about that. So let's move on to our next question. And again, this is, yeah, outside of plans, let's move to strategies to address digital equity. What supports does your community need to address digital equity gaps in your community? Could they be financial, education, access, telecommunications? What supports does your community need to address the issues? Carlos?
Obviously, the main thing is funding. That's a major one, and the mayor just recently hired a full-time grant writer, Jessica Walton. So she's looking for all of our 12 departments, what priorities in minority affairs. She's definitely looking into what sources of funding, federal, local, state, charitable, private foundations that can address some of these issues. So not only is there federal money, but there's private foundation money. As a government, we want to go after that funding as well.
I'm gonna jump on that. I'm gonna piggyback on it, I should say. Of course, it's about funding. But I think it's also about supporting small companies that are focused on these issues, right? That you can't leave small business out of it. It's what drives everything.
Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit more in terms of
Well, I
small?
mean, yes, there's a lot to be said there, but just supporting companies in disadvantaged neighborhoods, in rural areas that are focused on not just the infrastructure, but also the application layer, right, and the access layer and the education layer. There are lots of folks out there that are trying to feed their people and build their retirements. They're also focused on these issues, and we talk to them all the time, and I just think that if you're going to come and spend public money on infrastructure, then you need to know how it's going to be sustained moving down the road. And the sustainability of infrastructure is in the application layer. It's in the entertainment. It's in the advertising. It's in the eyeballs. It's in what we do with the data. That has to be hyper-focused locally and supported by our governments.
And I'd also add, young people, once they're exposed to an opportunity, or they can see where a career path that they enjoy, they have passion for, like IT, that traditionally that may not be a career path that they would consider. I think just letting them know that IT touches everything. And if they realize a lot of the devices they use, the games they play, somebody had to design that code or create that device. I think it's going to open up an interest on the part of our students early on in their elementary, middle, or high school to say, wait a minute, this is something I would enjoy going into because I understand this career. And I think getting exposed to IT as a potential career will motivate a lot of our young people in our school system to want to go to school, to go to truancy rate. We could see at the end of getting that diploma that this could actually open the door for economic opportunity.
I want to touch over here to SLCC. So I know that you guys work a lot with adult learners that go all the way from, finishing your high set all the way through whether it's credit or non-credit, and just think about the strategies that you guys are using. Are there ones that seem to be successful, or at a community level, things that we're missing, especially as we're thinking about adults that are coming back to school that may lack those literacy skills? And I know you guys ask you specifically because I know that you also LSU have some programs that are tailored to folks that go back to school that don't have been out for too long and don't really have those skills.
So at SLCC, what I've heard from the other colleges represented here today.
Not really a behind the mic kind of girl, but it's good. So Charlotte Lella, I'm the Director of Transportation Distribution and Logistics for SLCC. But speaking on behalf of SLCC and the question that was asked, I think basically SLCC is in the same situation as the other colleges represented here today. Of course, we do laptop loan programs. We've extended hours in our computer labs and extended what those computer labs look like to try and fill the need, that digital divide for our students. But moving forward, we do have programs embedded into a lot of the training programs that we offer as a college to try and help close what that gap is, what that learning gap is. I like what LSUE has going on with your, and I'm gonna look it up, but with the curriculum that you're currently using to try and help close that divide as well. I don't think it's one that we're currently using, and I'd like to know more about that. But that's basically where we are.
Hi, I'm Lori Blandino. I'm with Louisiana Board of Regents, but also with Lewis, the Louisiana Library Network. And I'll just mention for any community colleges that are here today, or any institutions of higher ed at all, we offer the North Star program through, we pay for it through the Board of Regents. And that program is an online portal for students to be able to gain those basic digital literacy skills. It also has the curriculum that you can teach in a classroom setting. And it provides certificates of their assessments, and it provides certificates. So each time an assessment is passed, a student gets that certificate, and then they can use that, in the workforce to prove that they have these digital literacy skills. So please get in touch with me if you need to know more about North Star. Any other thoughts, comments, questions on the strategies to address digital equity? Okay, we'll move on to our last question, which is communication. And I guess this is a more of how do we improve our efforts by our different modes or specific modes of communication that we should consider specifically for our incarcerated folks, for workforce development, for our school students, what modes of communication. We do have a survey that's queued up, but what other types of communications are needed in order to get specific feedback from our stakeholder groups? Social media, text messaging.
This is really important.
Mail.
The communication piece is really important because, as I sit sort of listen, I'm hearing that there's stuff going on, but the disconnect is a lot of folks are not aware. Whether, ACP, though we have a ton of folks that have enrolled, there's still a ton of folks that can benefit from it. Whether it's programs from libraries, what have you. So the success of a lot of this stuff is going to be depending on communication, which is why you see a lot of us on the road, why we're going to do a lot of this. But what is the, it's not singular, what are the best ways that we can all come together to communicate all of what you're doing to constituencies that you serve or constituencies that could be served by everything you do?
If you're gonna try to reach the youth, you have to use social media.
Okay.
So, for grandmother and grandfather, you might have to use the location there.
Yeah.
Because I know my grandparents have their social media. They will not answer the phone if they don't know it. They call like these there on their home phone, so they don't call from the number. So I think the location there, especially when it's very gap with the
There's a lot of this state, they don't seem to have popular right now.
Kind of connected to youth, we gotta get in schools, physically have a presence in schools and engage the students basically.
But what does that mean?
I mean, I'm not in the school system, so I don't know exactly what that means, but as a parent of somebody in the school system, I would love for my kids to get pulled into a council office or have a group meeting and show them what's available, what resources they might not know about. That's it.
Can we do like a pitch for introducing? Oh, sorry, Kelly Duyon. I work for Blue Cross in Blue Shield, Louisiana. I'm just here to listen, and also a mom, over 14-year-old and 21-year-old. And I live in Crowder. So we'll do like a pitch competition. I know we do a lot of those across the state to engage the students, to give us ideas on how to communicate with them. This, you look at this room, none of us are under the age of 18. So we can make it fun for them, and then incentives would be scholarships and, other things like iPads and computers.
So it sounds like we've got a funder in the cross-functional.
That sounded like a volunteer for me.
I'm gonna text Steve Woodward, hi, the CEO, and say thank you.
And then the other thing is, I just ran into this with my grandmother. She had a telehealth appointment and she called me. She's like, I don't know what to do. They just sent me a text message. I have to fill out this paperwork before they'll even schedule the telehealth appointment. She couldn't click on the link from, so I'm like, there's all these barriers to access for health, for education for the elderly. She does watch a lot of news, so I would think commercials for that, like they said, mail, but I sat there with her for 2 hours and I couldn't even explain it to her how to do it. I had to be there to show her and do it for her, and she's almost done.
So we talked about modalities, which are social media, mail, picking up the phone, and then having a resource at the, a little bit more of a permanent or regular rhythm of a resource at school. But who do elderly folks, young folks, look up to and listen to, in their communities? Pastors, who? Because that's really important, is not only the modality, but the messenger. So who do typically folks listen to?
For our youth program through Acadiana Workforce Solutions, we pick student ambassadors. We have student ambassadors actually reach out at their peers at their school. They'll listen to other kids, especially if it's a kid that's popular. But they'll listen to other youth. They won't listen necessarily to myself. But if you have someone dancing in front of them on a TikTok video or Snapchat, they will listen. Because they don't answer text messages if they didn't know your phone. But you send them a little video by some of you coming up and you singing and dancing and asking the food on TikTok or Snapchat, they're gonna respond to you and they will apply. So that's what we found as a good reach for the youth that we serve. We serve 16 to 21 during the summertime. So, and that's what we utilize. And Facebook is out. They don't use Facebook anymore. Instagram is almost on the way out. So for 16 to 21,
for younger people,
it's almost out.
You got that many.
Because we took a little survey with them and they don't use Facebook, they don't use Instagram, it's very seldom now. But TikTok and Snapchat is very
Okay, so what about for older?
Yeah,
The older?
my grandmother does Facebook. She's 90.
To Facebook.
I was talking to a grandmother yesterday. They respect grandchildren. They just give them the device and say, here, you
figure it out.
Or the grandchildren just take the device and say, I do it for you.
So Carly, I want to call on you too in terms of I know you're 1 foot, still 1 hand, a finger over with United Way and thinking about the Alice population, and I know you change jobs, but can you still speak to as you're reaching out to the Alice population when you were at United Way, what are the communication methods that were most successful there, and how can we make sure that we're addressing that population?
Well, I think one of the things that we have not done as much today is talk about the different, we said it at the beginning, but these questions in a rural community are very different than a more inner city impoverished area, right? So there's different strategies depending on the audience that you're trying to reach. And the reality is that I think you always have to be looking at who you're actually trying to reach. And so, when we were, I love the comment that Carlos said about the, grandchildren, when Kelly was talking about that, I was like, well, if you're trying to get those older people, maybe a marketing campaign that is teaching grandchildren and children that you are the person that is trusted to help your elders with digital devices, and like getting people to embrace that as their role and responsibility with the people older than that, right? Because most of them, not all, but most of them aren't interested in learning more than they need to learn. Like they're in a place of their lives where they're like, I'm good, but if I need it to get medical care, I want to be able to get medical care. But they're okay otherwise. So, I think the most important thing is kind of going back to looking, when you think of equity, like looking at the audience you're trying to reach and then figuring out what's right for their community and who they trust and listen to. And it really depends on how targeted you're able to get with your outreach efforts in order to do that.
Yeah, one of the things that resonated with me on a training that we went to is just meeting people where they're at. Whether that's, adjusting your meeting time or adjusting the messaging so that they can understand what's being asked of them. And that, really stuck out to me, and, we're definitely trying to incorporate that into our outreach methods. One of the questions I do want to bring up, what language barriers exist in our region? Do we need to translate some of the messages? Okay.
So you say you mean simplified.
I know, I was at a meeting last week, and someone said the average Louisiana education level is like a fourth grade education level, so you need a
Digital equity. Okay.
So
Got it.
That's a great point on simplification. In fact, we learned when we started spending time on the road that forget talking about very technical things, more than that.
plain speech.
So plain spoken. What about, I don't know, English as a first language? Is there a large Hispanic population?
Yes. 4%.
French?
Not so much French, but Spanish and sometimes Vietnamese and Lao.
Yeah. Lao.
The Hispanic population, Latino population, they want to manage. Yes. We have pockets, like Ildecon, Belize, it's a hot concentration of a lot of Spanish speaking.
We are a desert of Spanish speakers.
A lot of times you want to do, if you do pamphlets or anything like that, you want to do it at least in Spanish also, I think, would be the best route.
Any other comments on language barriers? One other question, what other communication challenges should we consider in this planning effort? And I'm gonna pick on my friend from the council, the Governor's Council. What other challenges should we consider in our communication strategies for our disabled folks? Is there any insight you can provide to that? What other communication challenges should we consider? Is online resources sufficient enough, or is there something different we should consider? We can definitely come back. Yes, nothing online.
So again, this is definitely a process, and you guys are our first group, so we thank you for all of the input that you've given us and the suggestions for how we can improve this process, but certainly, here's our contact information at the Blanco Center. Please stay in touch with us. If other things come up, let us know, and, please do share the information with that online form with those that you work with, those that are, within your community. Try to get as much input as we can.
And one last thing, if you didn't sign in or verify your email before you leave, if you could please do that, because we do plan on sending up a follow-up email to everyone. Vinny, if you had a last.
Yeah, the last thing is that, look, this is gonna be, an evolved process, just like our grant program, just like working on the problem. So this is gonna be constant iteration, constant process improvement. Nothing is gonna be sort of static, right? So we need as much feedback from all of you between now and sort of in perpetuity, right? Because we get this thing as close to white as possible. But I think what's also important is this. We are in an academic setting. If I said this when I was in college, I would be chastised, but we like to copy and paste. So if there are programs in other states, if there are programs in other markets that you think, hey man, these guys are doing something really cool or interesting that we think we can bring to Louisiana, please let us know. Because we have no problems ripping and duplicating what other states are doing. Of course, localizing it to the context of Louisiana. All right, so if you said, hey, they're doing something good to help the disabled community, or folks where English is not a primary language, or others incarcerated, then please let us know. Okay, that is something that's really important to us.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
We appreciate it, folks.
Does she have a